Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant real-time odds in action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, and even UFC. Head to betonline.ag today and don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. Catching up on a little bit of news from this past holiday week, Penn State has landed Troy wide receiver Devonte Ross in the transfer portal. So as of the time of this recording, that makes 3 players so far that Penn State has landed in this transfer portal cycle. Wide receiver Kyron Hudson from USC, and also defensive end / edge rusher Anai White from Texas A&M. Penn State doing a good job addressing positions of need heading into 2025. Taking a look at Devonte Ross, for those that don't know, in 2022 with Troy, Ross had 13 catches for 147 yards. In 23, 40 catches for 428 yards and 3 touchdowns. And this year, 76 catches for 1,043 yards and 11 touchdowns. You can see that incremental progress. Devonte Ross, 5'11", 161 pounds, out of Cartersville, Georgia. Now, the interesting comp that has been put out there on social media is his former teammate at Troy is somebody Penn State just saw very recently in the Big Ten championship game. He is currently Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson. Now, Tez Johnson was at Troy, was listed at 5'10", 150 pounds at that point, and recently lit up Penn State to the tune of roughly 180 yards receiving in that Big Ten championship game. Now, Devonte Ross, who spent time at Troy 3 seasons, was able to hang 142 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns on Iowa this year while still at Troy. So this is going to be an interesting addition to Penn State's wide receiver room in that you can see the big play ability, you can see the productivity. However, you have to acknowledge the level at which it occurred, and that's something that Penn State has dealt with in the past. I constantly draw the comparison to Dante Cephas within the MAC, coming from Kent State and then transferring to Penn State, and things just ultimately not working out. Devonte Ross has that explosivity, has that speed, that game breaker ability. However, it's occurred in the Sun Belt, and that's something to consider in all this, is that you just can't really jump to conclusions with some of these transfer portal acquisitions. I think Penn State has learned that lesson the hard way. Not to harp on Julian Fleming, but the brand and the conference don't always mean a guarantee of efficiency and productivity, nor does the lower level of competition for Devonte Ross guarantee that he won't translate. There's just too many variables. But I think the interesting conversation is to look at Penn State's wide receiver room heading into 2025. Now, there are some decisions still to be made at the time of this recording, in that Penn State has a few offensive players and wide receivers especially who have decisions to make to decide if they're coming back for a final season in 2025, 2 of which are wide receiver Trey Wallace and wide receiver Liam Clifford. We do know that the wide receiver I just mentioned, Julian Fleming, is completely out of eligibility. So looking at Penn State's wide receiver room remaining heading into 2025, again, so many things can happen. The transfer portal, injuries, heading to the NFL, a lot of this is speculative. But looking at Penn State's wide receiver room, just kind of working from the proverbial bottom to top, Dante Nastasai, wide receiver, redshirt freshman, Aaron Ennerline, a freshman from Manheim, Pennsylvania. Peter Gonzalez, who's somebody that we've had here on State of State and Justin King has worked with intimately over the years. Unfortunately, suffered a long-term injury over the summer. So Peter Gonzalez is somebody that I think Penn State hopes to factor into their future plans, but he's going to have to recover. Jake Spencer is a redshirt senior plus, so he's out. Ethan Black, redshirt freshman. Mekhi Flowers, redshirt sophomore, someone who transitioned from defensive back to wide receiver just this past offseason. Logan Cunningham, a redshirt sophomore out of Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. Josiah Brown, a freshman from Malvern, New York, somebody that has drawn some excitement, at least, entering the program. Anthony Ivy, redshirt sophomore, somebody that we have talked about for a little while. Is this a guy that could crack into that top 5, top 4, top 3 of wide receivers for Penn State? Tyler Johnson, redshirt sophomore. Caden Saunders, another name very much in the same boat as Ivy and I would say Omari Evans, as guys who have an opportunity to do something. Caden Saunders is hampered by injuries most of the season and eventually cycled out of the lineup and has been unable to play, but was returning kicks this season, was returning kicks last season, factoring in a little bit as a wide receiver, but obviously slowed up by injuries. Omari Evans, I think, is the one that stands out to me, and that I'm curious to see what this wide receiver room looks like next year. Again, Trey Wallace and Liam Clifford, incumbents, returning next season if they do decide to come back. I think Omari Evans has to be right there in the mix. If anything, the addition of Kyron Hudson and Devonte Ross just creates more competition at wide receiver. And I know a lot of people hear that, and it's not the most exciting thing to hear. You'd like to hear that, yes, this guy's going to jump in and bam, wide receiver number 1. I think Omari Evans is going to push people this year, or at least he has to, in my opinion. He has found his niche within the offense. He has that ability to take the top off the defense, but he's got to do more. And I don't know exactly how he gets to that next level. I sincerely hope he stays at Penn State. I know he has a great relationship with Drew Aller. They came in at the same time, but Omari Evans is certainly somebody I hope remains at Penn State into 2025. I also don't want to factor out Tysier Denmark, freshman out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from Emotep. I think Tysier Denmark has that pop, that explosivity, and we've seen him a handful of times this season. Somebody that a lot of the coaches were talking about during the offseason as somebody that's like, he's getting it, and it seems like Denmark has all the ability to put it together. The interesting part looking at 2025 is Andy Kotelnicki has been on the record talking about Kyron Hudson, specifically from USC. I believe the quote was that Kotelnicki thinks Hudson could be, quote, the queen piece of the offense potentially in 2025, which is an enormous statement to say about any type of player. Kyron Hudson was very productive at USC in a pass-happy offense, a very deep wide receiver room. There are a lot of wide receivers that did a lot of damage for USC, but are also into the transfer portal at this point, and that receiver room has disintegrated. So you have to ask yourself, is there a world where Kyron Hudson enters and is wide receiver number 1 in 2025, or is he number 2 to Harrison Wallace? Where does Liam Clifford factor into that? Where does Omari Evans factor into that? And how does Devonte Ross factor into that? Before we go any further, I want to talk to all of you about Future Fans Sports. If you've ever tried to help a kid understand football, you know that it's really hard. It's difficult enough talking to a full-grown adult who doesn't know the game and trying to explain the little nuances of the sport, because there are plenty of them. It's a complicated game. Future Fans is a new brand that helps little kids become big sports fans through storybook-led activity boxes that help them understand the sport. You can introduce the core concepts of a sport in ways that make sense to a kid. For example, instead of explaining something like downs in football, which, Justin, I know that is it's difficult when you're explaining that to a lay adult, for instance, there's this beanbag toss game that has things like 4 tries and 6 points embedded into it, and then later the storybook connects all of that to football. You've dealt with this. You work with people of all different ages and trying to spread the message about the game. This Future Fans product, I think, is a really nice tool for parents, especially.
Absolutely. Like, any way to engage with your kids, whether it's about becoming a fan, whether you want to work in the sport, whether they want to participate in the sport, learning the context of the game from the rule standpoint and the birth of the different reasons why the game and the rationale behind the different rules really brings in different level of context for younger kids and for adults, to be completely honest, because you can't learn a wealth of knowledge without the basics. And I think this, Future Fans really provides that great educational foundation for any sports fan, participant, or avid learner.
And you're a dad, and this was invented by dads, and they figured this all out for the rest of us, which is awesome. This product is designed for kids aged 4 to 8 and the football fan adult in their life. It's only $49.99 at futurefans.com, and you can get a 15% off discount just in time for the holidays with the code Penn State, all one word, PENNSTATE. Again, that's 15% off with the code Penn State at futurefans.com, so you can unlock a lifetime of memories around sports this holiday season. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. I think the interesting thing, and I've covered it before on this show, is that under James Franklin, Penn State continues to recruit a similar type of wide receiver, in that there aren't too many wide receivers that Penn State has gone and gotten that have enormous size. You say 6'2" for Peter Gonzalez and Aaron Enterline, and a couple of guys that are coming in as a part of National Signing Day that have some size. So you're encouraged by that. But at this point, you're recruiting a lot of wide receivers who are, roughly 6 foot, roughly 180 pounds. And that's seems to be the type that James Franklin, and no matter who the wide receiver coach is, who they like to get into this program. So Devonte Ross, I think, provides some excitement. It is a bit of a project in that you have to see if this game is going to transition from the Sun Belt into the Big Ten, but there's going to be opportunity. And I feel stronger about this wide receiver room going into 2025 than I did about it entering 2024. It feels like there's more competition. It feels like there's more depth. It feels like, credibly, there's 4 or 5 guys that you could see vying to get consistent reps in the passing game. And I think the really interesting part of what Penn State's passing game could be in 2025 is my anticipated absence of Tyler Warren. If Tyler Warren is indeed going into the NFL draft, he's made it very clear his focus is on the Fiesta Bowl and this college football playoff. I expect him to go, but you also have to consider what the offense is going to look like from a passing standpoint without him, because he has been far and away the biggest part of the passing game for Penn State. Do you supplement that with other tight ends going into this season? Now, we've talked about the tight ends in the past, and there's just tremendous depth. Joey Schlaffer, Luke Reynolds has played a lot this year. Khalil Dinkins has played a lot this year. Andrew Rappelier is somebody they're excited about, but sustained an injury and has been recovering for most of this year. Finn Firmanek, as well, as a redshirt freshman, not to count him out, but the tight end room is deep once again, and there's plenty more tight ends coming in as part of the class of 2025. So I'm interested to see what Andy Kotelnicki wants to do in terms of the emphasis of where Penn State throws the football. And I think it's been very obvious for a few years now. Penn State needs to get better productivity out of its wide receivers. And another aspect of this, Kotelnicki staying in 2025, do you start to see the progress in the recruiting, whether it be through high school or the transfer portal, at that wide receiver position, that he's starting to put his fingerprints on this offense? Because you could understand in year one, Kotelnicki comes on campus and it's like, hey, here's the personnel. Let's get ready for the season. Cool. Now that Kotelnicki is committed to Penn State for 2025, at least, how much input has he had on the recruiting? How much input has he had on the transfer portal, watching tape, saying, yep, I like that guy. I can do this with this guy. Obviously, his comments about Kyron Hudson are very intriguing. Devonte Ross is going to be an interesting addition, I think, to this wide receiver room. And ultimately, Penn State needs the competition and they need the explosivity. And that's the consistent thing I've seen on tape from Hudson and now Devonte Ross is two guys who do have that big playability. It's just a question of whether or not it's going to translate to Penn State. I think you could look at what Kyron Hudson was able to do. Yes, it's within the Big Ten, formerly the Pac-12, a guy who has done it at a high level, so you have less apprehension about that. Devonte Ross, it's very much a wait and see type of thing. Certainly has had the productivity at Troy. I mentioned the Tez Johnson comparison. That's all well and good. Got to see what it looks like once he's wearing the blue and white. So I'm very excited about this with Devonte Ross. I think this is another good acquisition for Penn State in the transfer portal. Penn State's just continuing to hit positions of need. I think they're still continuing to look at defensive tackle as well, offensive line potentially as well. Some hits that they need to make, I think, at defensive tackle are going to be important in this transfer portal cycle, but 2 additions at wide receiver and 1 addition at defensive end, really important acquisitions for Penn State. And all of this amidst getting ready for the quarterfinal matchup against Boise State on New Year's Eve at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State versus Boise State. We're going to have a full preview episode coming out soon here on State of State. So like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. We will get that to you as soon as possible. And of course, we will have a recap episode of Penn State versus Boise State once the game concludes. Thank you so much for joining me here. Penn State adding Devonte Ross to its wide receiver room for 2025. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.